Feeling like you need a larger helping of Horde? Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Masterverse Princess of Power Hordak. Banished from Eternia by his pupil Skeletor, the vile Hordak rules the planet Etheria from the Fright Zone with cruel technology and dark magic. This ruthless tyrant delights in the pain and misery of others, even those in his evil horde who are most loyal to him. How about before we have a look at Hordak, we first grab the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. And then, of course, we'll do some comparisons also in a moment. The figure, taking it right to the very top of the crest that goes around his head, the figure stands about 7 inches in height, or Hordak's 18 centimeters tall. And as for Hordak's former pupil, here's what the figure looks like with the Masterverse Skeletor. This was the one that had the barbarian armor. I usually just like to display more in the classic look. Skeletor is technically taller if you look at the heads, although again with the bone crest that goes around Hordak's head does give him a little bit of height advantage over Skeletor. Here's what the figures also look like with the 40th anniversary He-Man. Still haven't fully warmed up to that figure. Yeah, you can again see in this case that He-Man is a lot taller than both Hordak and the previously looked at Skeletor. For accessories, Hordak actually doesn't do too bad for himself. He has all the things you would expect a Hordak to come include with, as well as a couple of other surprises as well. First of all, the figure comes included with his crossbow. The crossbow almost for a second looks like it's using glow-in-the-dark plastic, sort of the way it's got this translucent white plastic. And of course, in this case, you can actually see the string that runs from end of bow to end of bow is actually done here sort of in a really cool flame effect. It doesn't actually shoot anything, nor, unlike the classic toy, would be able to push this together and spring it out. It is all more for show than anything else. You can clip this around Hordak's arm. It's not the easiest, mind you, but it just clips just before, actually just beyond the point of his gauntlet bracelet, and it clips around his wrist. He doesn't actually so much hold it, as it just kind of clips around him like he's blinging himself up before a night on the town. The figure also comes included with a shield. The shield, like everything else, Hordak likes to identify as being his, so of course it does have the Horde face, Hordak's face there on the front, has the bat wings on the side. I like the little extra scratches that they've added there as well. It's smooth in the bat wings, yet coarser in texturing on the back of the shield. It's a nice looking shield. It does fit around his arm, so what we can do is actually just remove the crossbow for right now, slide Hordak's arm straight through it. And of course, this would be much more helpful if I did have the gripping hand, but I'm just going to show you for right now. It does fit around Hordak's arm, but again, it's going to work so much better if you actually use the hands that come included with the figure. Like, for example, this gripping hand. This gripping hand works so much better to actually hold the shield. Simply just go ahead and remove the existing hand, which is a closed fist. Just to state it before we go ahead and remove it. Go ahead and remove Hordak's hand from the socket. There we go. And then we'll just replace it then with the gripping hand. And then from there, you can go ahead and take the shield, slide the hand through, and then take the hand and do your best to clip it around the end of the shield. It's not the easiest to do, mind you, but you can succeed in doing it. We're just going to actually put it to the side, though, for the time being. The figure also comes included. I'm getting him to stand. Standing, by the way, is one of the worst things about Hordak. I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a moment. The figure also does come included with a trigger-firing finger. It doesn't really belong necessarily with anything. I mean, it's not like he's... I guess you could clip it around and look as if he's using an imaginary trigger, but it doesn't really seem to serve much other purpose than that. It's not like as he comes with a gun or anything along those lines, but easily, again, you can just pop that off and then, again, replace it with this hand right here. The figure, speaking of swapping things out, does include also comes included as well with his Canon arm. Usually, more times than not, I usually display the figure with the Canon arm, just because I like the design of it a lot more. It sticks mostly to the same color scheme, although you can see the texturing is a lot different. It's more ribbed along, you can see in the plastic, whereas more smoother in the muscle of the arm that we started things off with. And then from this, actually the arm does have a couple of other swapped out parts. Just to change the arm, though, not to get too attached to this, because we're going to detach it right now. It's actually pretty easy to remove. Then go ahead and take your Canon arm, plug it back into place. And now Hordak does have himself the Canon arm. From there, he actually does have two options available for displaying. He has one that actually has the little pincer claw, nicely molded here in gray plastic. This simply, again, just, you take the end of it, which is a very long plug, large, thick plug, and you sort of have to just wiggle it back and forth till finally attaches to the end. Seems a little strange for me to have that on the end of the Canon. I always think of this as something that's going to go pew-pew, not something that's going to go seep, seep, seep. I don't think that's actually what pinchers sound like. We're going to go ahead and just pull that off, though, in the meantime. If you do want some firing effect, he does also come included with this. It's not as translucent as I was expecting it to be, but a nice flame effect attachment that attaches the exact same way. A fairly thick plug that plugs in, again, just to the end of it. And then finally, Hordak can go pew, pew, pew. I like the look of that. I mean, obviously, it's going to add a little bit more front heaviness when it comes to displaying the figure. And when it comes to his feet, which we will talk more about in a moment, Hordak does have a little more harder time to stand, at least on the figure that I have right here. Go ahead now to remove that. I was kind of hoping that was going to pop a lot better than what it did. Getting, though, a closer look at Hordak. This one I ended up having to order online simply just because, once again, local stores here in Canada, forget about it. Forget about it. Toys R Us didn't have it. Walmart didn't have it. This guy's been around for bits, and finally got the chance to order this guy over on eBay. The prices wasn't too bad. I know most of the places where I normally order my figures from, this guy is still set as a pre-order, so I'm not even sure why it's taken so long for their sites to actually get this guy stocked. But getting him actually in hand, he's a nice-looking Hordak. I wasn't sure I was going to be so crazy about the head sculpt. There was something about it that looked off to me when I saw images of him online. Yet, though, when I'm finally getting this guy a chance to have him in hand, I actually do really like the head sculpt quite a lot. He's very squinty. You can see his eyes are a lot more narrower, a lot thinner than maybe what we're used to seeing with Hordak. Still has the pig nose, the very long ears there pointed on the back. His head isn't so much painted white as it sort of looks like it's been painted in, or molded at least, in sort of pearl-esque kind of white plastic. It sort of has a weird sheen to it. Again, I was expecting it to see it more in white, but I kind of actually like the way they've done it in this pearl color. Of course, you got the blue there, crest of this tiny little mohawk there on the front. As a kid, I always thought that this was his entire head, till realizing later that this is actually a collar piece, that this is only Hordak's head here. The collar piece technically is removable, although I wouldn't want to take the time to take it and detach it. It plugs here on the back by pegs, and once you detach it, I guess we could try to do this here. Detach it, obviously would have to remove the head. Maybe I'll just end up leaving it, but you can technically remove. All right. I did say I was going to do it. Let's go ahead and see if I can actually do it here. Yeah, this would, technically you'd have to pull the head off first, but then you can then remove the collar. I guess if anything, it only gives you the opportunity to look at Hordak without his collar piece. Maybe like his earlier days before he became and took over the Horde. There's that option available, but again, just for the work of having to try to remove the head, that's going to be the hardest thing to do, simply because it's, pretty tight inside the quarters there of his collar. It's going to be a harder time to remove that. But take my word for it, you can remove the collar piece if you wanted to. The cape technically also attaches to that, so once you remove this, then you can remove this, then you can remove this. He does have a nice cloth cape here on the back, spiked along the bottom here. It's a nice actually, soft goods cape that he actually has. Kind of reminds me of like the older days of like the Kenner, like Star Wars figures, for example. This piece can also detach from itself. The front half detaches from the back half, and you can remove it all together, revealing underneath basically a Master Universe body underneath, which I'm sure they're probably going to be using countless times for other figure releases. The coloring is quite good on this one. You got the Hordak done here in red, the nice outlining of the bone done in gray, and also that continuation of the bone all the way across the, try not to cover the front of the figure, but all around the front of his collar piece also as well. The blue is handled well. The blue is very similar to like Web Store, if anybody remembers my review of the Web Store. Very similar to the type of blue that they end up using. He has the little bicep piece that goes around, the little band that goes around his bicep, and equally well, he has also the little molded bracelet there also around his wrist. And of course, if one that does enjoy loincloths, there's also the loincloth there as well. Although in this case, it's actually a pretty hard plastic. It doesn't necessarily limit the articulation on the figure, but it's pretty hard plastic nonetheless. Some additional detailing, as you can see down below here. I almost feel as if like these Horde symbols should have been done in red, not necessarily black. There's so much black here, but also, to be fair at least, I'm glad to see that they used at least a shinier, darker black, so it doesn't blend in with the more matte black that they use for the feet. Speaking of his feet, here's where I have the problem with this figure. This foot isn't so bad, but I've tried my best to heat this up, and it seems really stuck. I don't really like the way they've placed the foot. They have left enough socket space in order to have the foot actually rotate and actually hinge it. But the way they've got the hinge, first of all, you got to make sure that you've got it facing the right way. See, the hinge is facing this way, for example, so it's going to wreak some serious havoc if you decide to bend it the opposite way. You sort of have to keep twisting it around until eventually you get the hinge in the right place that you want it. You sort of have to keep shimmying it over. Even then, when I found I was hinging it up and down, see how much space is actually behind the back where the heel of the foot is. If you have this too tight, which I happen to have here for Hordak right now, if you're bending too much pressure against this, most certainly that's going to snap. This foot on the other side isn't so bad, but it also seems as well like it's further back on the heel. And yet, if you look at this one right here on mine, there's a gap space right at the back, almost as if the peg is in the wrong place. Again, I've tried to shimmy the foot around. I've tried to move it. I might even have to try to pop the foot off because, again, I feel like it's in the wrong place or there's too much gap space on the back that I'm going to break it if I'm not too careful. There's Hordak's feet, by the way, big giant flippers. And he does technically have pegels on the undersides of his feet. Even though the figure doesn't come included with a display stand, I most definitely could use a display stand from another figure line. Okay, let's have a look at the articulation for Hordak. It's going to be a little harder, of course, to get access to his head, simply just because it's inside the collar piece. But it does technically look up, down, and yeah, somewhat back and forth also as well. It's a lot easier just to kind of put your face against, your thumb against his face, and actually move his face that way. The upper torso is on a ball joint, even though despite the fact he has such a large chest armor piece over top of it, arms rotate all the way around. And no matter whether you change this hand out or this arm out, or you keep the original one in place, the arms work the exact same way. Again, rotate all the way around. Figure does have a bicep swivel. Figure does also possess a double hinge on the elbow, and the hands rotate all the way around. As for the legs themselves, they split out. You can kind of go a little bit forward, a little bit back, but really, again, the tightness and the hardness of that plastic sort of does eliminate a little bit of forward movement on the legs. 3/4 of the way up the thigh is a swivel cut, so you can rotate the leg all the way around. The figure does also have a double hinge on the knee. Articulation also as well in the boots, and because this one's a little easier to move, the feet move up and down this way, and there's a nice ankle pivot happening there as well. If you had the chance to pick up Hordak, congratulations, you got yourself a nice looking figure. But also let me know down below in the comment section if you had any issues with any of the ankles on Hordak. As you see, I can kind of have to put them in a kind of weird stance in order to compensate for the fact that something seems off on that ankle there. You saw it in the review. This side's fine. This side yet, however, has a big gap on the back of it, and it's really wreaking havoc when it comes to the figure's ankle articulation. Because I didn't actually show you guys over the course of this review what Hordak looks like without the back of the crest piece for his collar, I took the liberty of actually just popping the head off. In fact, it was actually a lot easier than I was expecting it to be. The collar piece then from there slides off the 3 pegs located on the back, and then from there you can also take off the cape. So if you did want to have Hordak without the collar piece, you can do that. If you also want to have removed the cape, you can also do that as well. What it does, though, unfortunately leave behind is 3 very obnoxious looking pegs in the back of the body, but at least I would much rather have those there than have a tough time getting the collar piece and the cape to stay in place. I have also taken the liberty of properly attaching his hand to the shield, so I feel like I've picked up the slack where I've slacked a little bit over the course of this review. You can actually get the shield properly in his hand, and then for no reason whatsoever, he does have the trigger firing finger that's shooting, I guess, a trigger that's on the bottom of the crossbow. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but at least you can actually attach it on both sides of the figure's body. I like the look of Hordak. Don't like really the way the ankle is constructed on the one side of the figure's body. I did try my best in between takes to try to move things around. I also put it in hot water again, but the placement of the peg is kind of more the issue than actually the peg being able to, or the hinge joint being able to move better. Again, I don't know why it's constructed that so awkwardly on the one side of the figure's body, and yet the other side is perfectly fine. Either way, though, Hordak's standing fine for right now. Knock on wood, he's not going to be falling over. We may want to wrap things up right now in this review. Again, this guy was available a while ago. Unfortunately, it took me a while to actually get this guy tracked down. At one point, I did order it online as a pre-order, but then the pre-order sort of got pushed ahead. I think even the site where I normally order a lot of my figures from have this guy slated for, I want to say like March or April of 2023. I said to myself, I can't wait any longer. I want to get this guy as part of my collection. So I ended up ultimately ordering this guy over on eBay. I didn't pay that much more than what I was hoping to pay for this guy, and I'm glad I finally got this guy. I've also, since that time, I've actually also ordered the She-Ra, so we will be looking at the Masterverse She-Ra in an upcoming review. But what do you guys think of Hordak? Let me know down below in the comments section. Is this a figure that you have either already picked up or is this a figure that you're planning to pick up? Let me know down below in the comments section. Certainly as well, if you enjoyed this video, hit a like. If you're loving the content you guys are seeing and do certainly want to stick around for more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. And of course, as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.